The air in Novigrad Magna, even hundreds of meters above the long buried ground, didn't just feel dense, it felt heavy, like the accumulated weight of centuries had settled into the very atmosphere. It was a physical sensation, the consequence of billions of lives lived and breathed within this colossal structure, processed and recirculated by colossal systems that were as fundamental to the city as bone was to flesh. Novigrad Magna wasn't merely built, it had accreted. Layer upon layer, a geological marvel of human habitation. Concrete, steel, nutrient-rich biocrete, and generations of fused polymers formed a mountain range of urban life, interwoven with vast vertical farms that clawed upwards towards artificial or filtered sunlight and a complex, multi-level network of transport arteries, silent, automated shuttles gliding along impossibly high sky bridges and humming through the deep, reinforced subterranean tunnels that were the city's roots. From Sarah Jenkins's command node, nestled high in Sector Delta 7, the vista was a dizzying descent through history. Below, the city fell away into a humid haze, each distinct stratum a marker of time. The lowest levels hinted at medieval stone and early industrial ironwork, giving way to mid-millennium reinforced concrete's clean lines and the smoother integrated forms of late-millennium biocrete. Ventilation shafts, wide as ancient colosseums, punctuated the layers. Colossal lungs for the urban organism. Sky bridges, some wider than any structure Sarah had ever seen in a historical archive image of a ground-level city, formed an intricate web connecting the immense vertical pillars of human life. To navigate Novigrad Magna was to traverse time. A descent wasn't just distance, but a journey through centuries of accumulated existence and engineering. Open space was a forgotten concept, replaced by meticulously managed communal zones and transit hubs. Privacy? A state mediated and allocated by the pervasive network of technological systems that governed daily life? More a privilege or necessity for system function than an inherent right. It was November 2025, a year notable not for recovery from a global catastrophe, but for the relentless continuity born from its historical absence. Novigrad Magna, like vast urban conglomerations across Eurasia and other densely settled regions, pulsed with a life that had never been subjected to the brutal demographic pruning that had reshaped another history. The divergence, the quiet inflection point, occurred not through war or a sudden leap in technology, but in the subtle biology of the mid-14th century. Yersinia pestis arrived, a familiar passenger on ancient trade routes. Yet here, its interaction with hosts, flea and human, took a different turn. It did not mutate into the rapidly transmissible, overwhelmingly fatal pneumonic or septicemic forms on a pandemic scale. Perhaps a variation in the dominant bacterial strain or subtle differences in the vector populations, the black rat or its fleas, made them less efficient spreaders in dense urban environments. Historical epidemiologists debated other factors. Slightly different gene frequencies conferring a marginal population-level resistance in Eurasia, or specific environmental conditions limiting the pathogen's virulence. Regardless of the precise cause, the devastating pandemic known elsewhere as the Black Death failed to materialize as a continent-spanning cataclysm. Localized outbreaks occurred, as they always had, causing significant loss of life in specific areas. But there was no unstoppable wave that decimated 30 to 60% of populations across continents. The demographically shattering event of the 14th century elsewhere simply never happened here. The most profound, immediate consequence was demographic continuity. Populations, instead of plummeting and taking centuries to recover, maintained their established gradual growth patterns. Growth was still constrained by famine, limited arable land before the advent of vertical farming, and endemic diseases like tuberculosis and influenza, persistent threats, but not civilization-altering ones. The sheer number of people on the planet continued its steady, upward trajectory. This uninterrupted rise rippled through history, fundamentally altering its course. Without mass death creating desperate labor shortages, the power dynamics between landowners and peasants, masters and apprentices, remained largely unchanged. The leverage gained by the surviving poor in other histories simply didn't emerge. Feudal structures, less stressed by depopulation, persisted longer, dissolving through slow economic shifts rather than collapsing under demographic pressure. The urgent need for labor-saving technology was muted for centuries. With abundant human hands relatively inexpensive, investment favored maximizing yield per acre, organizing massive workforces for building projects like the early urban layers, or improving mining and logging. Land remained the primary source of wealth and power, fueling territorial disputes and shaping social stratification. Cities grew relentlessly, often outstripping the development of sanitation and public health systems, leading to constant struggle with density-related diseases and waste management, chronic issues without the brutal resets of periodic depopulation experienced elsewhere. Social mobility was potentially more constrained. The random, tragic void left by the plague elsewhere offered rapid advancement for survivors. Here, structures tied to land, hereditary trades, and established status remained more entrenched, evolving slowly. Economic development proceeded, driven by trade and innovation focused on scale and efficiency, rather than replacing labor. Trade routes remained vibrant, unimpeded by mass mortality in key hubs. Politically, states evolved with larger potential populations for taxes and armies, but faced intensified internal competition for space and vital necessities. Warfare involved larger forces, but was driven by different pressures. The shift from feudal levies to state armies took a different path. The age of exploration, when it arrived, perhaps spurred by intense land pressure or rivalry, involved nations with larger populations capable of sustained colonization. They encountered populations in other continents whose own histories of growth and disease exposure had also unfolded differently, leading to unpredictable outcomes in global interaction. By 2025, the most striking consequence was the density. Cities were colossal, multi-tiered structures, vast urban ecosystems built on centuries of layering. Space was the ultimate premium, allocated and managed with micro-precision. Competition for vital supplies, clean water from massive condensers, processed air from filtration plants, energy for the immense infrastructure, nourishment from the vertical farms was constant. A fundamental reality driving innovation and tension. Societies had adapted over centuries, developing sophisticated density-focused public health, closed-loop waste processing, multi-level transport, and intricate social management systems, some benign, others controlling, all maintaining order in unprecedented proximity. Social structures, while modern, retained echoes of a world where labor was cheap, and control of physical space and vital flows meant power. Technology was breathtakingly advanced, honed by necessity, the sustainable management of billions, and maximizing efficiency in the use of materials and energy. Agricultural tech, hyper-optimized farms, precision nutrient delivery, genetic engineering for yield. Urban infra, multi-layered transit, total waste recovery and recycling, atmospheric water harvesting, climate control within zones, population tech, sophisticated tracking, real-time allocation of necessities based on complex metrics, behavioral modeling, social oversight, research into demographics, ecological constraints, complex systems, and high-density psychology was critical and highly developed. Our story centers on Sarah Jenkins, a senior systems engineer for the Novigrad Magna Municipal Authority, overseeing the integrated life support and transport network in Sector Delta 7. Her node was a nexus within the city's digital nervous system. Curved displays showed dynamic data streams, pulsing energy grids, flowing liquids, shifting population density maps, air quality indices. It was the city's complex metabolism, visualized. The air in her filtered office, though clean, felt thick, carrying the subtle scent of ozone from the air processors and the distant, ever-present hum of the city's machinery, a sound that usually faded into background noise, but today felt like a low vibration in her bones. On her desk, next to the bland gray nutrient paste mug, sat a small, chipped ceramic figurine of a bird, a piece her grandmother had owned, a tangible link to the older, denser layers below. Her task was balance, ensuring millions received allocated supplies, that transit moved smoothly. A constant, high-stakes negotiation with complexity. She ran a hand over the smooth, cool surface of her console, a small, unconscious gesture of connection to the system she commanded. Routine was fragile. As the cycle wore on, a critical failure alert didn't just flash. It screamed across her main display, a violent crimson rupture. Substation 7 Alpha, a primary water recycling facility deep below, was failing. The impact prediction models flared red, water allocation dropping for 50,000 units. In a city where reserves were a thin margin against constant demand, this was immediate crisis. A metallic taste flooded Sarah's mouth, a familiar stress reaction. Her gaze snapped to the screens. Initiate failover to redundant systems for Substation 7 Alpha. Prioritize residential allocation, Sarah ordered, her voice crisp, overriding the blare of the alert. Fingers flying across the console, actions flowing in a practiced sequence. Power rerouted from non-essential systems across Delta 7. Public info feeds, low-priority climate control, research clusters, boosting recycling in adjacent sectors. Notify health and sanitation, code yellow. Potential temporary reduction in water quality and pressure. Dispatch primary maintenance automatons and human rapid response teams to Substation 7 Alpha. Priority Red 1. The sector AI responded instantly, visualizing the complex network adjustments, highlighting predicted impact zones in amber, confirming team dispatches. But the failure was a physical thing, propagating faster than models predicted, spilling from water into waste processing units, sharing critical power and fluid transfer loops. A choke point was forming deep below, in that ancient, troublesome zone where 17th century infrastructure was still fused with modern systems. It was a vulnerability born directly from centuries of unbroken layering, a historical weakness in the city's guts. A voice, tinny and strained, crackled over the comlink, fighting interference from accumulated metal and ancient shielding. It was Mike, the lead human maintenance supervisor, a man whose knowledge of the lower levels was legendary, already on site. Sarah, it's bad. Stress fracture near the old main collectors. Load settling, maybe from that microquake last month. Triggered cascade in the original 1680s pumps and heat exchangers. The integration points. Where the old stuff meets the new, they're blowing out under pressure. Bots can't patch this alloy. We're blind, Sarah. Need schematics for the 1680 section, the municipal waste heat exchange. The original diagrams, not the overlays. Overlays don't show the undocumented bypasses, the manual overrides at these cursed junctions. His voice held the weariness of a man who spent his life battling the city's history, but underlying it was a stubborn, unbreakable resolve. Sarah could almost picture the sweat beading on his forehead in the humid, low-level air. Sarah's hands paused for a fraction of a second above the console. The 1680s, a period of explosive, often chaotic growth after an early industrial boom. Before codes, before standardized digital records. Schematics were fragmented, stored on obsolete media, locked behind layers of bureaucracy at the Historical Archives Division. Curators of the past, not partners in emergency engineering. A memory flashed. Her grandmother, frustrated, trying to make a broken water purification unit work during a district-wide shortage years ago, the sheer effort of it. This was about more than pipes. It was about the daily struggle for basic supplies for people like her. The taste of metal intensified in her mouth. Requesting immediate priority access to the Central City Historical Archives, Sarah dictated, her voice tight. Engineering schematics for Sector Delta 7, Substation 7 Alpha, 1680s infrastructure, municipal waste heat exchange, collector integration points. Access authentication, engineering priority red 1. Level 2 supply failure, 50K units impacted. The digital request vanished into the city's central nervous system, seeking passage through layers of administrative firewalls and ancient data protocols. While the request processed, time stretching, measured in potential human discomfort and system degradation, Sarah rerouted non-essential water usage across Delta 7. Public fountains died silent deaths. Communal cleaning drones paused their circuits. Less critical vertical farm sections received reduced nutrient water flow. She watched the data streams shift, red pressure indicators stabilizing slightly with the reduced load. But the predicted impact area for contamination if the waste system ruptured expanding. An agonizing delay later, the archives responded. Temporary access granted. A new screen filled with a chaotic blend, scanned parchment, blocky early digital text, hand-drawn annotations. It was a visual history of engineering improvisation. Lines crossed, labeled in archaic jargon, connections unclear. Sarah became an archaeological detective, sifting through centuries of layered information for the junctions Mike needed. And then she saw it, a faint, handwritten annotation on diagram 1688 Delta 7 HX003B, almost lost in the clutter. Seasonal overflow bypass, manual valve access, connects to old storm drain Alpha 9R. An undocumented feature, probably forgotten for centuries after full recycling loops became standard. Could it still be viable? A spark of desperate hope, mixed with cold calculation of the risk. Mike's voice crackled. Anything, Sarah? We're running out of time down here. Working against time? The digital world of data streams meeting the physical reality Mike reported from the deep, humid, groaning levels below. Sarah directed manual overrides and pinpoint repairs. She was a remote surgeon, guided by ancient blueprints and Mike's voice. The air he described was thick with the smell of ozone, damp stone, and the acrid stench of failing processing fluids. Mike, on diagram 1688 Delta 7 HX003B, look for annotation seasonal overflow bypass, Sarah instructed, tracing the faint line on her screen, the AI overlaying it onto current structural scans. It indicates a manual valve approximately 2 meters north of your position, embedded in the wall near the main collector junction. Looks like a large wheel. It connects to an old storm drain route designated Alpha 9R in this document. Seeing it, Sarah. Mike's voice was strained, sounds of scraping metal audible. Panels welded shut by rust. Bots are trying to cut access. Alpha 9R? Yeah, that's on our maps. Assumed decommissioned for centuries. If this valve opens, it'll vent raw waste heat and processing fluid directly into the lower strata. Major contamination risk for several blocks in the lowest residential zones. Level 3 environmental hazard. Sarah heard the tension in his voice, the unspoken dread of what that meant for the residents down there. His neighbors, perhaps. Sarah's hand clenched, her knuckles white against the console. Level 3, forced evacuations, long-term health effects, years of cleanup. It would hit the poorest, those living closest to the ancient ground hardest. It was the kind of decision system managers in this world dreaded. But the pressure readings were critical. A full rupture meant collapse for the whole sector's life support, affecting millions. The undocumented bypass was their only option to buy time. Authorize Level 3 environmental risk for temporary pressure release via Alpha 9R bypass, Sarah stated, voice steady, though her jaw ached from clenching. She felt a shiver run down her spine at the words. Authentication. Jenkins, Senior Engineer, Delta 7. Log time and code. Proceed with manual valve override, Mike. Be careful down there. That bypass might be fragile. The crisis became a desperate negotiation between the digital and the physical, the present and the past. The manual valve, groaning, finally turned, yielding with a shriek of stressed metal. A torrent of foul-smelling steam and hot fluid vented into the dark, ancient channels of storm drain Alpha 9R far below. An acrid wave washing through the forgotten infrastructure. Pressure in the main collector dropped just enough. Repair bots, guided by Sarah via Mike, applied rapid hardening biocrete patches and energy fields to stabilize the main fracture. Mike's team, breathing filtered air, used portable pumps and flexible conduits to bypass the most critical failing integration points, using portable pumps and flexible conduits, working directly on the 17th century hardware, guided by Sarah's interpretation of the arcane diagrams. The forgotten bypass had bought them vital time. Slowly, agonizingly, the cascading failure halted. The data streams, which had been a frantic, terrifying red, began to calm, receding to their normal pulsing greens. Water flow stabilized, power grids returned to standard configuration. Sarah leaned back, the surge of adrenaline receding, leaving a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. Managing Novigrad Magna in 2025 wasn't just about maintaining advanced systems. It was about managing the physical and systemic weight of history, the complex, demanding consequences of centuries of uninterrupted demographic and urban growth. It was a constant, precarious battle for order and sustainability against the inherent pressures of scale and density in a world that had never faced the great population-thinning event of the plague. Her gaze rested on the small ceramic bird figurine. The Level 3 environmental hazard below, it would take years to truly fix. Lives disrupted, potentially long-term health impacts for those nearest the old storm drain. She had saved the sector grid, saved millions from immediate catastrophe, but the solution had come at a cost to those living closest to the city's roots, a cost she had authorized. The challenge wasn't a lack of people or innovation. It was the overwhelming, complex task of managing the sheer abundance of both, the constant negotiation with a past that was inextricably woven into the present, demanding vigilance, ingenuity, and sometimes choices that weighed heavily, to ensure the city's pulse continued to beat. The quiet hum of the systems returning to normal was the sound of millions living on, a triumph of continued existence, but also a constant, low-grade pressure, a reminder that the averted crisis was just one battle in a war fought every cycle against the sheer weight of history, a history that had never known how to thin itself out. And the undocumented bypass, its existence, raised questions. How many other forgotten systems lay dormant in the city's ancient bones? Were they potential solutions or hidden threats waiting to surface? The hum of the city offered no easy answers.